The morning of the reunion had arrived. It was an ordinary Saturday, much like any other, but the air felt different somehow. Emily seemed to be in a good mood, and I too was content with the simplicity of the day ahead. The sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow over the countertop as I sat with my coffee, scrolling through emails on my phone. Emily was moving about the house in her usual manner, checking her appearance in the mirror, organizing her bag, and double-checking the address for the reunion later that afternoon. "Are you sure you're going to be okay tonight?" I asked as she tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "It's been so long since you've seen your classmates. Are you sure you want to be gone the whole evening?" She smiled at me reassuringly. "Of course, I'm going to be fine. You know how these reunions are. It'll be a great chance to catch up with everyone. Plus, it's only for a few hours. I'll be back before you know it." I nodded, my thoughts lingering for a moment on her words. It was true. Emily had kept in touch with a few of her classmates from college, but this was the first time in years that they'd organized a reunion. She had been excited about it for weeks, constantly talking about who would be there and how she was looking forward to reconnecting with old friends. I didn't mind. Honestly, I was happy for her. Emily deserved this. Our relationship had always been built on trust, and I had never once felt a reason to doubt her. "All right," I said, taking a final sip of my coffee. "Have fun. Call me if you need anything." "I will. Love you," she said with a wink as she grabbed her jacket and headed out the door. "Love you too," I replied, watching her leave with a sense of calm contentment. The day was still young, and as Emily headed out to meet her friends, I had a few things to take care of around the house. I settled back into the couch, glancing at the clock. It was still early in the afternoon, and I decided to catch up on a few work emails while I had the house to myself. The silence felt oddly peaceful, a reprieve from the constant bustle of daily life. Emily's absence, although temporary, made the house feel quieter somehow, but I was okay with it. She needed her space, and I was happy to give her that. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself in a familiar routine. I answered emails, organized some paperwork, and even started planning for the week ahead. The hours passed quickly, and as evening fell, I thought about what to have for dinner. I texted Emily around 6 to check in on how the reunion was going. "How's the reunion going? Are you having fun?" A few minutes later, her reply came through. "It's going great. Everyone's here. I'm having a blast. I'll probably stay a bit longer, though. They're talking about going for dinner after this. I'll keep you posted." I smiled at the message and set my phone aside. It seemed like she was enjoying herself, which was all that mattered. We hadn't had much time for ourselves lately, with work and other obligations consuming most of our energy, so I was glad she had this opportunity to reconnect with her friends. I didn't want to be the kind of partner who held her back from doing things she enjoyed. A couple of hours later, I received another text from her. "Running late. Might grab dinner with a few people from the reunion." It wasn't uncommon for her to be out late when catching up with friends. She'd been like that in college, always one of the last to leave a gathering. I figured it was probably just the same thing happening again, a night of good food and conversation that stretched on longer than expected. She had always been a social butterfly, someone who could talk to anyone for hours. Around 10, I felt my phone buzz once more. I picked it up, expecting another update from Emily, but when I unlocked the screen, I saw that the text wasn't from her, it was from Mark. Mark had been my best friend for years. We'd met in college, and our friendship had only grown stronger since then. He was the kind of guy who could always make you laugh, who had an answer for everything. We'd been through a lot together, and I trusted him as much as I trusted anyone. His text was short, but it was enough to stop me cold. "I think Emily might be in trouble. I need to talk to you." I froze, my heart skipping a beat. My mind raced, unsure what to make of the message. Mark wasn't the type to send vague, cryptic texts, and he certainly wasn't one to cause panic. I immediately typed back, "What's going on? Is everything okay?" It took a moment, but then my phone buzzed again. Mark's reply came in quickly, almost as if he had been waiting to explain. "Look, I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but I'm at the reunion and I saw something that's not right. I don't know how to explain it, but I thought you should know. Just please call me when you get this." My stomach churned. There was a knot tightening in my chest, and I had no idea why. This wasn't like Mark. He didn't send messages like this. I had no idea what could be so urgent or so serious. I called him immediately, the uncertainty of the situation gnawing at me with every passing second. "Mark," I said when he picked up, my voice a little too tight, "what's going on?" "What do you mean something's not right?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the sounds of people in the background, muffled chatter and the clinking of glasses, but nothing that seemed out of the ordinary. Finally, Mark spoke, his voice softer than usual. "I don't know how to say this, but I saw Emily. I saw her with someone. Not just talking or hanging out with a friend, but, well, it looked like more than that. It wasn't just friendly." My pulse quickened, and a cold wave of panic washed over me. I didn't understand. "What do you mean? What happened? Who was she with?" Mark hesitated again. "It was me, man. I don't know how to explain it, but she was with me, and it didn't feel right. I don't know if she was aware of it, but I thought I should tell you. I feel like I'm the last person who should be saying anything, but I'm worried." I felt a wave of nausea rise in my throat, as if the air around me had thickened. "Mark, are you saying Emily was with you? Like, in what way? What exactly happened?" He sighed deeply. "I didn't want this to happen. I don't know what to tell you. I'm just trying to be honest. It wasn't just a hug or a kiss on the cheek, man. It was more, and I didn't know what to do about it. I don't know if it's something that happened between the two of you or if something went wrong, but I had to let you know." A silence fell over us as I processed his words. Every nerve in my body was on edge, and I felt my stomach churn as the pieces of the conversation started to fit together in a way that made no sense. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what had just been said. "What do I do now?" I whispered, almost to myself. "What the hell do I do with this information?" Mark didn't have an answer for me. Neither did I. The call ended as abruptly as it had started, leaving me standing in the middle of the living room, my hand still gripping the phone. A sense of disbelief washed over me, like a cold gust of wind sweeping through my chest. My mind raced as I tried to process the conversation with Mark. He hadn't given me enough to go on, just vague details about Emily being with him in a way that felt more intimate than it should have been. He said it didn't feel right, but how could it not feel right? He was my best friend. I had trusted him with everything, with my life, and yet now I was left with this nagging doubt. I paced the room, unable to sit still. Mark had told me it wasn't just a friendly chat or some innocent gesture. He had said it looked like more than that. A part of me wanted to believe it was just a misunderstanding, maybe a misinterpretation of a harmless situation. But another, darker part of me couldn't shake the cold knot of dread tightening in my stomach. The image of Emily, my wife, with someone else, someone I knew, felt like an impossibility. How could this be happening? I checked the time. It was getting late. I glanced at my phone, expecting another message from Emily, but the screen remained blank. I had sent her a quick text after I spoke to Mark, asking her how her evening was going, but there was no response. I stared at the phone, willing it to ring. Each minute that passed made my anxiety grow, feeding my mind with more wild thoughts and fears. What was going on? Where was she? Why hadn't she replied? I shook my head, trying to silence the chaos in my mind. I couldn't jump to conclusions. Mark had made it clear that he didn't know the full story. He had seen something that made him uncomfortable, but it didn't necessarily mean there was something going on between Emily and him. I wanted to believe that, but the doubt gnawed at me. What if Mark was right? What if Emily had crossed a line and I had been the last to know? As I sat down, I stared at the empty space in front of me. The living room felt eerily quiet, and I found myself imagining all the things I didn't want to believe. Mark's words echoed in my mind. It didn't feel right. What did that mean? Was he talking about a fleeting moment of physical contact, like a kiss on the cheek or a touch that lingered too long? Or was it something more, something deeper? I didn't know what was worse, the idea of an innocent mistake or the possibility of something more serious. I needed answers, and I knew I wouldn't find them by sitting here ruminating in this void of uncertainty. The only person who could give me the truth was Emily, but she wasn't here, and it was late. I couldn't call her now and risk sounding like I was overreacting. If I confronted her without knowing the facts, I might push her away, and that wasn't what I wanted. I had to be sure. I stood up and walked toward the kitchen, attempting to calm my nerves. I opened the refrigerator, not really hungry, but needing something to occupy my hands. I grabbed a beer, unscrewed the cap, and took a long sip, hoping the cold liquid would help clear my head. But it didn't. It only made me feel more restless, more on edge. The phone buzzed in my pocket. My heart skipped a beat as I pulled it out, half expecting it to be from Emily, but when I checked the screen, it wasn't her name. It was a number I didn't recognize. Hesitating for a moment, I answered the call. Hello? There was a pause on the other end before a voice I didn't immediately recognize spoke. Hey, is this Jacob? Yeah, who's this? The voice hesitated again before responding. It's Sarah. Emily's classmate. We were at the reunion tonight. My pulse quickened. What was Sarah doing calling me? Why wasn't Emily calling me herself? Hi Sarah, what's going on? Is everything okay? There was an uncomfortable silence before Sarah spoke again, her voice sounding unusually cautious. I think you should know something about Emily and Mark. I felt my blood run cold. My grip on the phone tightened, involuntarily. What about them? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though it was clear my mind was already spiraling. Look, Sarah said, her voice lowering as if she didn't want anyone else to hear. I don't know the whole story, but I saw them together tonight, and it didn't sit right with me. I thought you should know. My heart raced. What do you mean? What exactly happened? Sarah took a deep breath before responding, as though weighing her words carefully. They were alone for a while, talking in a corner, and when they came back to the group, Emily seemed a little off, like she was avoiding eye contact with everyone, especially Mark. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I saw them leave together, not as a group, but just the two of them. I'm not saying anything happened, but I thought you should be aware. I didn't want to see you get hurt if something was going on. I stood there in stunned silence, unable to process what she was telling me. They left together? Alone? My thoughts swirled like a storm, and I suddenly felt very dizzy, as if the room around me was closing in. I had trusted Emily. I had trusted Mark. And now, I wasn't sure what to believe. Why had they left together? Had they been talking for so long that it made sense to walk out of the reunion side by side? Or was there something more to it? What did Sarah see, and what was she implying? Sarah, I managed to say after a long pause, my voice shaking. Are you sure about this? Are you sure it was them? Could it have been a misunderstanding? I can't say for sure, Sarah responded, sounding almost apologetic. But I just wanted you to know. I'm sorry if I've made things worse. The line went quiet again. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of uncertainty. Thanks for calling, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I'll take it from here. I hung up without saying goodbye, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and anger. Gratitude that Sarah had at least been honest with me, but anger that I had to hear about this from someone else. Why hadn't Emily called me? Why hadn't Mark said something sooner? I dropped the phone onto the counter, my hands shaking. My thoughts were all over the place, spinning faster than I could catch them. I needed answers, but every answer I got only seemed to raise more questions. Why was Emily avoiding me? Why was Mark acting so strange? And why hadn't anyone been forthcoming with the truth? I paced back and forth in the kitchen, my mind a blur of conflicting emotions. I was angry, hurt, confused, but most of all, I was terrified. The fear was what gripped me hardest. The fear of losing my wife, the fear that something might be broken between us, and the fear that I didn't know how to fix it. The door creaked open and I froze in place, my heart leaping into my throat. Was it Emily? Had she finally come home? I turned toward the door, bracing myself for whatever was about to happen. But when I saw her, my heart sank. It wasn't Emily. It was Mark. The moment Mark walked through the door, I couldn't help but feel the tension between us. My mind was still reeling from the phone calls, Sarah's message, and the growing dread that had been building in my chest all evening. As soon as I saw him, standing there in the dim hallway light, I knew this conversation wasn't going to be easy. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to scream, but something held me back. Instead, I stood frozen, staring at him. Mark was my best friend. We had been through thick and thin together, had shared our successes, our failures, our secrets. He was supposed to be the guy I could count on, the one who would always have my back. But now, as he stood there with his eyes avoiding mine, I wondered if I could ever look at him the same way again. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His hands were stuffed in his pockets, and he looked worn out, almost like he'd been waiting for this moment but wasn't sure how to begin. I could see the guilt written all over his face, though he didn't say anything right away. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. My head felt like it was swimming, the weight of everything that had happened over the past few hours threatening to pull me under. But I couldn't let it. I needed to know the truth, even if it was the hardest thing I'd ever heard. "Mark," I said, my voice low but steady. "What happened tonight?" He shifted, glancing down at the floor for a moment before meeting my eyes. There was no easy way to say this, I knew, but I needed to hear it from him. He couldn't keep avoiding the subject. "I don't know how to explain this," he said, his voice sounding strained. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. It wasn't supposed to go this way, but I can't keep pretending I didn't see what I saw." I was already feeling nauseous, the truth hanging heavy in the air between us. "What exactly did you see, Mark?" I asked, my voice tight, almost shaking with the weight of the question. He took a deep breath, rubbing his hand over his face. "Emily was acting strange all night. She wasn't like herself. I noticed it when she first got there, but I didn't think much of it. I thought maybe she was just tired or something. But then, later, she started talking to me. It was just casual at first, you know? We were just talking about old times, about college and stuff. But then, something changed." He paused again, his eyes flicking nervously toward the window. I could tell he was wrestling with the words, trying to find a way to make this sound less damaging than it was. But there was no easy way to sugarcoat it. I could already feel the pain rising in my chest. "What changed?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. Mark looked back at me, his expression apologetic but resigned. She started getting closer, physically. It wasn't a big deal at first, just leaning in a little when she laughed, or touching my arm when we talked. But then, it got more intense. She didn't pull away when I touched her arm. She didn't seem to care. And I don't know, man, it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel like something a married woman does with her husband's best friend. The words hit me like a physical blow. A sickening cold spread through my body, and I felt a lump form in my throat. My heart raced as I struggled to keep my emotions in check. Emily had been close to Mark, yes. They had always shared a friendship that was easy, comfortable. But this? This wasn't just friendly banter anymore. There had been something more, something intimate. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. What could I even say? My thoughts were all jumbled, my head filled with 100 different questions. How could Emily do this? Why had she allowed it to go this far? What did it all mean? Was this the beginning of something bigger? Or had it been a one-time lapse in judgment? Mark continued, his voice more hesitant now. After a while, she pulled away. She looked uncomfortable, and I thought she was embarrassed. I tried to back off, but then, when the reunion ended, she said she was going to go grab dinner with a few people. I didn't think much of it, but then... "Then what?" I interrupted, my voice snapping with a sense of urgency. I needed to hear the rest of it, no matter how painful it was. "Then, when everyone else was leaving, she and I were the only ones left at the bar," Mark said, his face flushed with guilt. "And I didn't think she'd want to leave alone, so I offered to walk her out. We stepped outside and she just stopped. She looked at me like she was waiting for something, and man, I don't know why, but I kissed her. Just a quick kiss, like I had no control over it. I pulled away right away, and she didn't say anything at first, but then, when I looked at her, she just..." He stopped mid-sentence, his face flushed with shame. I was frozen, the words sinking into my skin like cold steel. Mark had kissed her. It was like I had just heard the world stop spinning. My pulse was pounding in my ears as the weight of his confession settled into my chest. "You kissed her?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Yeah, I did, Mark said, his voice cracking with regret. And I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was a stupid mistake. I don't even know what I was thinking, but it happened, and I couldn't just pretend like it didn't. I staggered backward, the room spinning around me. I had trusted Mark, and I had trusted Emily. Now everything I thought I knew about them was crumbling before my eyes. The betrayal wasn't just about one mistake. It was about everything that led to that moment. The way Emily had acted, the way Mark had been complicit in it. The whole night felt like a lie, like I had been living in a dream and suddenly woke up to find everything was wrong. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked, my voice raw with emotion. Why didn't you just stop it? Mark looked guilty, his eyes downcast. I didn't know how to. I didn't want to hurt you, man. I didn't want you to think I'd ever do something like that on purpose. But I couldn't lie to you forever. I couldn't let it go without telling you. I ran my hand through my hair, trying to keep my emotions in check. I don't know what to do with this, Mark, I said, my voice thick with pain. I can't believe this is happening. I don't even know what I'm supposed to feel right now. But you kissed her. You kissed my wife. My best friend kissed my wife. Mark didn't say anything for a moment, and for the first time, I saw genuine sorrow in his eyes. I'm so sorry, he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted any of this to happen. It's all my fault. There was nothing more to say. My mind was racing, but I couldn't process it all. The reality of the situation felt too unreal to grasp. I had no idea what would happen next. Could I ever trust either of them again? Would things ever be the same? I couldn't look at him anymore. I turned away and walked to the window, staring out at the darkened street. The lights from passing cars flickered in the distance, but everything felt distant, detached, like I was watching the world from a distance, unable to reach out and touch it. Mark stood there in silence for a long moment. I could hear him shifting, but I couldn't bring myself to look back at him. Eventually, he spoke again, his voice softer now, almost pleading. I know I can't fix this, but I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. If you want me to leave, I will. If you need time, I'll give it to you. But please, don't let this ruin everything we've built. I didn't answer him. I didn't know what to say. How could I? What could I possibly say when everything I thought I knew was shattered into pieces? The truth had been revealed, but the consequences were only just beginning. I couldn't remember how long I stood there, staring out at the passing cars. The rhythmic glow of their headlights blurred through my peripheral vision as I tried to make sense of everything that had just been revealed. My mind was a tangled mess of emotions, each one fighting for dominance, anger, disbelief, hurt, confusion, and most overpowering of all, a deep, gnawing sense of loss. Loss of trust, loss of innocence, loss of the life I had thought was solid and real. It was all slipping through my fingers like sand, and no matter how hard I tried to hold on, it was gone. The silence in the room was suffocating. Mark hadn't left yet. I could still hear him breathing in the background, his footsteps shifting uneasily behind me, as if waiting for me to speak, waiting for me to tell him what to do. But I didn't have the words. How could I? Eventually, I broke the silence, my voice hoarse and raw from the emotions that had been strangling me. I don't know what to say, Mark, I said without turning around. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel right now. I could hear the quiver in my own voice, the weight of all the things unsaid hanging in the air between us. You kissed her. My wife. Mark didn't respond immediately. I didn't expect him to. What could he say that would change what had happened? What could he say that would make it better? I never meant for it to go this far, Mark finally said, his voice unsteady. I swear, I never wanted to hurt you. I'm so sorry. Stop, I interrupted, finally turning around to face him. I was shaking now, unable to stop it. My heart was hammering in my chest. Just stop. I don't need the apologies right now. I don't need to hear that you didn't mean for this to happen. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to lash out, to scream, to do something that might make the pain go away. But I knew it wouldn't. Nothing would make it go away. I can't do this, I said, my voice trembling. I can't just forget that you kissed her. I can't just pretend that everything's fine and that we can go back to being the way we were. The words felt like they were choking me as they left my lips. This is too much, Mark. It's too much. Mark's face was pale, his eyes pleading with me. I never wanted to hurt you, Jacob. You're my best friend. You have to know that. I nodded slowly, not because I agreed, but because I couldn't bear to argue with him anymore. I didn't know what to feel. My anger was tangled with betrayal, my hurt was mixed with confusion, and all of it was like a storm inside of me, one that I didn't know how to calm. He took a step toward me, but I took a step back, instinctively putting distance between us. Don't, I said softly, though I was practically choking on the word. Just don't come any closer. He stopped, his face filled with regret. But there was something else in his eyes, too, something almost desperate. What do you want me to do, Jacob? He asked. I can't change what happened, but I want to make it right. I'll do whatever it takes. I felt a wave of nausea rise in me, but I pushed it back. You can't fix this, not anymore, I said, my voice quieter now, almost a whisper. You've already crossed a line, and so has she. Mark didn't know what to say. He just stood there, a look of helplessness on his face. I could feel my emotions boiling over, but I didn't want to explode. I didn't want to lose control. Instead, I turned away from him again, trying to focus on the one thing I could control. My breathing. How did it get to this point? I asked, more to myself than to Mark. How did everything just fall apart so quickly? Mark shifted awkwardly behind me. It wasn't supposed to be like this, man, I swear. It was just a moment, one stupid mistake. But it wasn't about you or her or anything like that. It was just... Stop making excuses, I said sharply. I wasn't even sure if I was angry at him anymore or if I was just angry at the whole damn situation. It happened. It's real. And I have to live with that now. There was another long pause. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on both of us. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to throw him out, to never speak to him again. Another part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to forgive him, to somehow patch things up and pretend this never happened. But I knew I couldn't. I knew I wasn't that person. Finally, Mark spoke again, his voice quieter now, almost defeated. What happens now, Jacob? What do we do? I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't guilt. It was something darker. It was fear. Fear of losing everything we'd ever built. Fear of losing the friendship he had taken for granted. Fear of never being able to go back to the way things were. I swallowed hard. I don't know, I said. I don't know if I can keep being friends with you after this. I don't know if I can look at you the same way. Mark's face tightened, but he didn't try to argue. He just nodded, as though he had expected this. I get it, I really do. But I hope you'll at least think about it. You've been my best friend for so long, Jacob. I don't want to lose that. The words hit me harder than I expected, because as much as I was hurting, as much as I felt betrayed and lost, a small part of me still didn't want to lose Mark entirely, but the damage had already been done. I couldn't just ignore what had happened. I couldn't pretend that everything was fine. I can't be around you right now, I said, my voice finally steady. I need space. I need time to think. Mark nodded, his shoulders slumping in defeat. I understand. I'll go. And with that, he left. He didn't say anything more. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just walked out the door, leaving me alone with the aftermath of everything that had unfolded. I didn't know how long I stood there, just staring at the door. I was numb to the point where I couldn't even process the depth of what had just happened. The betrayal wasn't just a betrayal of my friendship with Mark. It was a betrayal of my marriage, of the trust I had placed in Emily. I needed answers. It wasn't long before Emily walked through the door. The moment I saw her, I felt my heart sink. She was smiling, that smile I had always loved, the one that used to make everything feel right. But now, it felt like a mask to cover the truth I already knew. Hey, she said, her voice light, almost too light. How was your night? I didn't respond right away. Instead, I just looked at her, searching her face for something. anything that would give me a clue as to what had really happened. "I need to talk to you," I finally said. My voice was calm, but I felt the storm building inside of me once again. "I know what happened tonight." Her eyes widened slightly, and for a brief moment I saw something flicker in them. Guilt, maybe. But then it was gone, replaced by the familiar, calculated calm that I had seen so many times before. "You know what happened?" she asked, her voice neutral. "Yes," I said. "I know you and Mark left the reunion together. And I know what happened after that." Her face went pale, and for the first time that night she looked truly vulnerable. "Jacob, No," I interrupted. "No more excuses. I don't want to hear it. I need to know why. Why him? Why did you do this?" She didn't answer immediately. She just stood there, looking at me like I was a stranger, like she didn't even know me. Finally, she sighed and took a step toward me. "I don't have a good explanation for what happened. But it wasn't about love. It wasn't about you or Mark. It was about me. Losing myself for a minute. I didn't mean to hurt you. But I did, and for that, I'm sorry." I felt a cold emptiness settle in my chest. It wasn't the apology I had wanted, but it was the only one I was going to get. I didn't know what came next. I didn't know if we could move past this, but what I did know in that moment was that everything had changed. And maybe that was for the best.